internationally as well. Um, as I mentioned, he's a past master of Honolulu Lodge, and before he was installed as worshipful master of Honolulu Lodge, most worship brother Frank Condello thought enough of him to name him Grand Orator. And you're going to hear why in a little bit as he shares his thoughts with us. If anyone's interested, I'm going to put in the chat in a little bit. There's a companion book to this presentation called Journey on, well, let's see, I can't see it well. It's called Journey on the Level. It's interesting, being an old college student, I tend to be a speed reader. I ended up slowing down reading this book because there was a lot going on, and there was a lot of reason for me to go back and double check what I was reading. So I'll put the link in there, and Owen will send it directly to you from his neck of the woods. But with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening, worship brother Owen Shieh. Owen.
All right, thank you, most worshipful brother Jim, for that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to meet everyone here virtually. I know I've been really missing in-person interaction when it comes to Masonic gatherings, so definitely gone a little over a year without doing much in person. So I'm going to share basically the presentation that I gave to the Conference of Grandmasters of North America. This was something that most worshipful Jim really graciously invited me to share with the group. I'm going to see if I can do a screen share here.
Gotcha.
So at work for the Department of Defense, I normally use Microsoft Teams. So Zoom is something we're not allowed to use at work. So I always have to relearn the interface. All right, so share screen. And then I can share my PowerPoint. All right. All right, do you see it? Is the screen visible?
I mean, yes.
All right. I see the screen.
Okay, perfect. One second. Okay. All right, so for this presentation, what I like to do is essentially take a moment for us to reflect on what it means to be a Mason. As we gather, as a lot of us are lodge officers or former lodge officers, and we're all brothers. We come from all different backgrounds, have different personalities, and enjoy different activities. Some of us enjoy doing works of charity and community service. Others love to pursue philosophical learning, and still others simply enjoy socializing and fellowship with our brethren. And every lodge kind of has its own character, comprising, of course, of its members. But what is it that keeps us coming back to lodge? What is the underlying thread that unites us all as an organization of good men who may otherwise have nothing in common? That's a question I always like to ponder. And over the years, I found that thinking about that question really can help us kind of zero in on what it means to be a Mason. And that then guides not only our actions, but also our leadership in our various lodges and organizations. So today I'm just going to speak about Blue Lodge in general. I know this is a Scottish Rite event, but we'll just speak about Freemasonry in general. So what makes Freemasonry unique among all other community organizations? We can spend countless hours discussing the logistics of running a lodge, debating how best to address membership retention, talking about the history and purpose of our fraternity. But the only guarantee of the future success of our fraternity rests with one word. And that word, for me at least, is inspiration. And now I'd like to share a short video clip from the YouTube channel, Whence Came You, that captures the sense of inspiration and mystery. Hold on. It's like, it's being a little glitchy. There we go. This should be better. So I really like that video because it really captures in very simple, just a musical background. It was able to really capture the sense of inspiration that attracts a lot of Masons to Freemasonry, or would-be Masons to Freemasonry, especially in the millennial generation, is what I've noticed. The one thing that must underlie everything then that we do as leaders of our respective lodges is to inspire future generations of Masons to contribute their talents to our fraternity. One way to ignite such inspiration among our brethren is to actively consider Masonry as a journey. Perhaps Brother Antoine de Saint-Exupéry captured this idea best when he said the following, quote, "If you want to build a ship, don't herd people together to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea," end quote. Simply put, Freemasonry is a journey of inspiration through transformation, a journey of finding personal growth and meaning in an otherwise complex and uncertain world. But this journey is one that must be undertaken of one's own free will and accord. Some find this personal transformation in offering charity, others find this in seeking education, and still others find this in cultivating fellowship. But once we acknowledge that common theme that underlies all of those preferences, that journey of inspiration through transformation, everything else about running a lodge, from logistics to retention, more naturally fall into place. So, what is a journey? Simply put, a journey is an activity where you go from one place to another. Journeys can be physical, or they can be more abstract and philosophical. Masonry happens to be both. It is a journey to the east within the officer's line, but more importantly, it is a journey of self-improvement, of fellowship, and of attainment of wisdom, or as it is sometimes called, enlightenment. If you think about the greatest journeys of all time, whether it be Odysseus's long voyage home after the Trojan War, or brothers Lewis and Clark's expedition across the American West, or brother Buzz Aldrin's trip to the moon, or even Luke Skywalker's quest to save the Jedi, they all have the same components. First, the main character meets an abrupt change or transformation that forces him outside his comfort zone. He may have an expectation of what is to come, but he is also ready for surprises along the way. Second, he meets many difficult challenges over a period of time that tests his mental and physical limits. Third, he endures, perseveres, and overcomes those challenges and becomes a hero. He learns about the people and places along the way, as well as his own responses to each of those unique challenges. And so as a result, he learns about himself. And then number 4, ultimately, he reaches his destination. But the final scene is often a surprise that is unexpected. Yet the journey was fulfilling. It was rewarding in some way. So think about our degrees of initiation, passing and raising. As a whole, don't they all have these 4 aspects of a journey? We acknowledge that Masons first become Masons in our hearts. We each have a story, and this story is often centered on a journey of personal transformation. So how did I start my journey? I first heard about Freemasonry from my best friend in college, actually, Brother Daniel Herr of Truckee Lodge number 200 in California. He and I went to Cornell. And back there, we would often suffer through our calculus problem sets together. And during those late nights, some of which were in that library that we were talking about right before this talk, we would often find ourselves lost in philosophical conversation. Years later, when Dan became a Mason, he started hinting at how I would enjoy being a part of this fraternity as well. I didn't pay too much attention to it at first, since I didn't know anything about Freemasonry except through the limited discussion we had about it in my high school history class. But there was one event in my life that inspired me to dig a little deeper. So after graduating from Cornell, I actually went to Oklahoma for a few years to pursue graduate school. As a meteorology master's student, I was involved with a lot of the tornado chase programs out in the field. So back when you saw the Storm Chasers episodes on Discovery Channel, that was when I was in Oklahoma and I was involved with some of those projects. So back when I lived in Oklahoma before moving to Hawaii, Dan came to visit me for a few days to go storm chasing. That's what meteorologists do for fun in Oklahoma. A lull in the storms implied fair weather and relative boredom in the Southern Plains. So during one of those rest days, Dan suggested that we go on a bike ride through my low-key town of Norman. Norman was a college town, home of the Sooners, but compared to the mountains of Northern California where Dan was from, it was devoid of really any major form of outdoor recreation, much beyond hunting and fishing. So I was actually a bit surprised by Dan's request to go cycling. "Where do you want to go?" I asked. And he responded, "So what, does it matter?" Looking at me with a slight hint of consternation. "Well, then where do you want to go?" I asked again, not finding it worthwhile to go anywhere in Norman without a purpose. "I don't know," he said casually, not seeming to care about my concern. "So do you want to pack a lunch or something? Maybe do a picnic at a nearby park, or maybe we can go check out the area by the small airport on the north side of town," I suggested, trying to come up with some purpose for the bike ride. Dan simply turned and walked out the garage with a bicycle in hand. "You coming or not?" he asked. Well, considering he was the guest, it would have been totally unbecoming of me as the host not to have at least tried my best to entertain him. So I dropped my doubts and decided to tag along. "All right, fine," I accepted reluctantly. And so we started our bike ride to nowhere in particular. We followed a road north through town, sped through several puddles left by the rain shower earlier in the day, and took turns in the lead. We made it to the northern outskirts of town near a municipal airport and tested our skills in tackling mud puddles on our mountain bikes. We explored unfamiliar roads and parts of towns to which I had never been. I was fascinated by the various convenience stores, small businesses, churches, and unfamiliar schools that were tucked away in the humble corners of town. Dan and I shared the details of our lives since we graduated from college, stories from childhood, and our hopes for the future. After 2 hours of riding around town, we returned to my house and cleaned up. Between the new sights, the good conversation, and the cool breeze on my face, I had completely forgotten about why we went on the bike ride in the first place. And yet I enjoyed every moment of it. I soaked in all the nuances of sight and sound. I learned things about the city of Norman that I did not know before. Although we were already good friends through our conversation during the bike ride, I learned even more about who Dan was as a person and how that fit with his life goals. But most importantly, I learned about myself. I learned about my habits. I learned about my usual mindset. I learned about my reactions to new places and new ideas. I learned to challenge myself, not physically, but mentally, all within the space of about 2 hours during a random bike ride around town. The next day, we had lunch before I had to take Dan to the airport to catch his return flight to California. During a pause in conversation, Dan looked at me and said, "Because you didn't know where you were supposed to go, you never would have gone on that bike ride, huh?" That comment completely caught me by surprise. I thought about it, then let out a sigh, grinned, and gave a slight nod. On our way to the Oklahoma City airport, I finally began to realize some of what I had learned through the bike ride, although the significance of those lessons would not hit me until over a decade later. People are so strongly attached to their goals in life that they completely miss out on the journey, Dan said to me in the car. Goals are good to have and all, but when we sacrifice so much just so that we can get something, when we don't even know if that thing is really what we need or want in life, then what are we doing? We're living for a dream, but not really living. As I drove into the airport departures area, Dan summarized his message with these words. If instead of concerning yourself with the score of the game, you concentrate your wholehearted efforts on doing the best that you possibly can in your role that moment, regardless of your task, living in that moment, that minute, that second, when it comes to the end of the game, you will have achieved more and scored more than you previously thought possible. This quote hit me hard. I did not know what to say, but thank you, as I dropped Dan off at the curb. But then he pointed at my head and responded, "It's all you," as if to say, "It's all in your head." And then he turned and left. Usually when we hear "it's all in your head," we assume it's false or just an opinion. But mental impressions do indeed define our reality. What's in someone's head manifests as reality for that person, whether we agree or not. So I may not have known it at the time, but through this bike ride, Dan had taught me the meaning of symbolism. And he was right. He didn't actually teach me anything. He simply set up the conditions properly so that I could learn a valuable lesson for myself. It really was in my head, and that's why it mattered. I took that bike ride as a symbol for my life without even knowing it, and all Dan did was indirectly point that out to me. So here's a good example. Take a look at this picture. What do you see? Perhaps just some random black and white patterns? Try as you might, it's difficult for your mind to construct the symbols into a coherent pattern of meaning. But what if I were to drop a hint to point you in the right direction? What if I were to say that this is a picture of a little animal, an amphibian that croaks? Now what do you see? It's if a frog all of a sudden jumped out at you, you'd be correct. Did you notice the mental shift that happened in your mind's eye, that momentary epiphany, that instant of clarity that came from a realization? Now that you see this picture for what it is, a frog, you can't unsee it. Thus it is with Masonic wisdom and enlightenment derived from inspired symbolism. Once a Mason experiences a personal transformation through inspiration, nobody can take that sense of fulfillment away from him. A lesson learned through inspiration sticks around much longer than merely hearing about it through a lecture. For me, one such moment of realization was that bike ride, and I've had many more since then on all sorts of topics, thanks to wonderful mentors along the way. Many of them just in conversation in the lodge room, sometimes outside of the lodge room, perhaps on a hike somewhere in the woods. With the epiphany that came from that moment of transformation, on that bike ride, I decided to petition Norman Lodge number 38 for membership, and the rest is history. I decided to, and so what Dan did without being aware of it at the time was inspire me to not only join Freemasonry, but to realize that everything around us, even something as simple and as mundane as a bike ride through town, can be used as a symbol to teach us the most important lessons in life. So imagine the possibilities if we can truly master the science and art of applying Masonic symbolism to our daily lives. By applying this methodology to symbols of our 3 degrees and in Scottish Rite, even more degrees, we can similarly inspire a new brother to apply the lessons of his Masonic journey to his daily life. When he masters that, then I promise you, you will have a Mason for life, and retention will never be an issue for that brother. And so in the words of an anonymous poet, you came with me on a long, arduous journey through many forests and jungles, the paths confusing and twisted. Sometimes I made you miss a turning. There was no promised pot of gold, but then, my brethren, it is not the gold. It was the search itself, the journey and your comradeship, the jungles we saw, the forests we conquered, the rivers we forded, and the links we made. It would not have happened if it was not for the pot of gold. So the act of becoming a master mason is the purpose of masonry. The light that we seek is not a destination, but an ongoing process. The journey itself is the pot of gold. At the end of this journey, we find peace of mind, the contentment and fulfillment that comes with becoming not just a master mason, but also a master of ourselves and our understanding of the world in which we live. The philosophies inculcated by masonry then come naturally to us with little effort, and the joy that results from this peace of mind is something that nobody can take away, because it is grounded on personal experience and practice. Every day is a journey, and the journey itself is home. It's a quote from Mitsuo Basho, a Japanese philosopher. So as we continue the important work during our coming year of Masonic events, I charge everyone here to think about how we can best inspire our fellow brothers, particularly the youngest and newest candidates at our lodges. The planning, logistics, finances, and everything else is important, but all of those things become far easier when we have a strong membership base that is grounded on personal inspiration. As a Masonic leader, you will know that you have succeeded when you no longer have to push your brothers to do something, and instead, you feel that you are walking the same journey together. Here's a view of just some of our lodge events before the pandemic hit last year. A lot of these photos were taken during my year as master. We planned a lot of events. Honolulu Lodge is blessed to have a multi-generational membership. We have everyone from really young enlisted brothers in the military to folks who have been a Mason for well over 50 years. And so facilitating that intergenerational dialogue, getting everyone involved and excited about Masonry is one of the main goals that I had as master. And so we would plan events from Relay for Life to clearing trails out in the woods to actually sitting down and doing Masonic education. We did quarterly banquets where we actually will invite a guest speaker from the mainland. I donated my United Airlines miles to the process to fly them out to Hawaii, and then they would come out and then they would speak, and we would have a formal dinner that we would cook in-house, and we would involve everyone from candidates to seasoned Master Masons in the process of preparing the meal, cleaning up, and then also providing mentorship to all generations. So it was a really, really rewarding experience of grounding our lodge experience on this idea of inspiration. And so I would like to end with my favorite Masonic poem of all time. One that I've printed out and keep handy whenever I myself need inspiration to move forward in Masonic leadership, no matter how rough and rugged the road ahead may be. These are actually the words of Brother Joseph Fort Newton in his book, The Builders, published in 1914. At the end of this book, he poses a question: when is a man a Mason? And this was his answer: when he can look out over the rivers, the hills, and the far horizon with a profound sense of his own littleness in the vast scheme of things, and yet have faith, hope, and courage, which is the root of every virtue. When he knows that down in his heart every man is as noble, as vile, as divine, as diabolic, and as lonely as himself, and seeks to know, to forgive, and to love his fellow man. When he knows how to sympathize with men in their sorrows, yea, even in their sins, knowing that each man fights a hard fight against many odds. When he has learned how to make friends and to keep them, and above all, how to keep friends with himself. When he loves flowers, can hunt birds without a gun, and feels the thrill of an old forgotten joy when he hears the laugh of a little child. When he can be happy and high-minded amid the meaner drudgeries of life, when star-crowned trees and the glint of sunlight on flowing waters subdue him, like the thought of one much loved and long dead. When no voice of distress reaches his ears in vain, and no hand seeks his aid without response. When he finds good in every faith that helps any man to lay hold of divine things and sees majestic meanings in life, whatever the name of that faith may be. When he can look into a wayside puddle and see something beyond mud, and into the face of the most forlorn fellow mortal and see something beyond sin. When he knows how to pray, how to love, how to hope. When he has kept faith with himself, with his fellow man, and with his God, in his hand a sword for evil, and his heart a bit of a song, glad to live but not afraid to die. Such a man has found the only real secret of Masonry, and the one which it is trying to give to all the world. Thank you for this priceless opportunity to share in virtual fellowship with you all tonight. I look forward to meeting you all in person someday. Till then, may your Masonic journeys continue to be the most inspired and transformative. Most Worshipful Jim had mentioned kind of early on that there's a book that accompanies this. For those of you who are interested in further reading on the topic of Masonry as a journey, I actually put together a book several years ago meant as a resource primarily for Masonic mentors, but really could be read by anybody, kind of focused on the symbolism of the 3 degrees. And you're welcome to, if you're interested, the website is Journey on the Level. You can acquire copies there, and I'll be sure to get them to you by mail. So again, thank you very much. I look forward after the pandemic visiting with you all. If you have the opportunity to come visit Hawaii at some point, please come visit Honolulu Lodge. We meet on Tuesday evenings. Based on pretty much every Tuesday evening, there will be something going on at Lodge. Recently, we were still very much virtual and minimized in terms of participation in person, but hopefully whenever this pandemic blows over, we'll resume our usual, which is every Tuesday evening, we'll do dinner, and there'll at least be some sort of fellowship or practice event. Stated meetings are the first Tuesday of every month. And then we frequently do degrees because we do have a pretty long wait list of people trying to petition the lodge. So with that, thanks again, and I'll turn it back over to Jim.
Thank you, Worshipful Sir. That I was introduced to Owen kind of a roundabout way. First conference of Grand Masters I went to, Frank Condello at the time was Grand Master of Hawaii, and he passed out copies of Owen's book to the Western delegation, and literally within 3 paragraphs, I was hooked. And I was fortunate enough when I was Deputy Grand Master to have Owen come and speak to that generation of leaders. And that was truly an amazing time. Funny aside, Owen wanted to be more than the keynote speaker. He wanted to actually teach. And he taught 2 classes, one on millennial Freemasonry and one on symbolism. And there was one time during when we were all teaching together, we noticed that a lot of us, quote unquote, main teachers had like maybe a half a dozen people in our classes. Well, we found out why. Owen had everyone else. I mean, they were interested. He had some incredible things to share. And I'd like to find out if anybody has any thoughts, comments, questions that they have of Owen while we have him here. Anyone, I'll open it. I'll just unmute your mic and ask away or say whatever you want to say. Because I have a question about on the back jacket of your book, you talk about the value of moments. Mm-hmm. That, it's, and I guess that runs parallel to the comment of it's not the end piece of or the goal that you set, but it's what you're doing along the way to get there, and how sometimes a left turn shows up. Could you kind of speak a little bit more on that?
Yeah. I find the concept of living in the present moment to be a fascinating topic, because you actually see a lot in you see that emphasized a lot in Eastern philosophies, mysticism. So everywhere from Middle East over to East Asia, Zen philosophy, you'll hear a lot about focusing on the present. I found that for a Western audience, it can be misconstrued, right? That there's a difference. So there's a part of the writing where I focus a lot on the difference between living in the moment versus living for the moment. And there's a big difference between that. A lot of the ancient philosophies have talked about living in the moment, meaning you free your mind of distractions, all the what ifs and buts and worries and replaying the past, even though it's in the past, right? So in other words, if you can truly drown out that chatter, then what you do here right now becomes that much better. And that was, in a way, Brother Dan, who was a basketball coach at the time, that was kind of the context behind his quote, was that if you, instead of focusing on the score of the game and worrying about winning the game, you focus on that moment, then you do that much better and the end result becomes better. But that doesn't mean that you only live for the moment. So I'm thinking about some of the counterculture movements that hone in on that moment idea and go, all right, well, now is all that matters, so that's all I'm going to care about, and I just splurge and live for the moment, right? That would be completely different. And I always like to make that clarification because it's an easy misunderstanding. Because if you truly live and understand this moment, you also see the connection between all of your actions in this moment to the various consequences in the future, right? And so if you're truly living in the moment, you're also going to make the proper decisions going forward. It's absolutely not just living for the moment and being blind to the future. And so that's the concept of moments is a very interesting one because it can be taken in different ways.
And there was another thing, again, obviously I went back to reread your book, before I knew you were coming to talk to us again. And I'm always fascinated, especially when you got to the part about symbolism, the concept of non-duality versus duality, of how somebody can look at one symbol and see something completely different than someone else, and or how people can see the same things, or how you need some sort of subcontext to see the full context.
Right. Yeah, and I like how essentially and I kind of derive some of that interpretation from some of the Oklahoma ritual, because in addition to the charge that you get at the end of each degree, there's also a symbolism section. And so an interesting interpretation of the first to second degree transition is that the first degree, you're seeing things in black and white, right? The thing you're standing on, black and white. But then as you climb higher in the second degree, figuratively up that staircase, what you're doing is you're seeing the bigger picture. You're seeing that for every black there is white, for every white there is black. And it's like you're zooming out and you're able to look at the whole picture from the top down. And so a lot can be derived from just that symbolism alone, right? Is something that may seem to be entirely negative can end up being a positive thing depending on the context, and vice versa. Something that may seem to be a blessing could actually have negative consequences that we didn't think would be possible. And so that's why one of the big lessons that can be derived from that is that when things are not going the way you like, when you're going through rough times, hold out hope that this too shall pass, right? And then when things are going your way, when it feels like you're being showered with blessings, be humble, right? Remind yourself that this too shall also pass, whether you want it to or not. And so that's one of the many lessons that can be derived from this idea of going from a dualistic perspective to one where you actually see the full picture.
Okay, wow. Anybody else have anything? Because I could have a private conversation all night with Owen. But yes, John.
Yes, good evening, most worshipful Owen. I'm John Brett from Tacoma. Your conversation and examples have reminded me of some odd things that I've seen. Some people, because of the way we grew up, because of the American environment, and our lifestyle and our family. We were taught one way of thinking of things, of finishing things, of winning at things. There's a couple of interesting phrases. Winning is not desired, it's the only thing. Winning is the only thing. And unfortunately, that concept is pushed hard into the American psyche. I remember when I was in the military, I spent a little 4 years in Germany, went on a lot of Volksmarches. I don't know if you have Volksmarches over there on the islands or not, or if you had the opportunity to go on them. Basically, they're laid out with certain stops along the way. There are very specific places. You're not intended to get lost. It's not like that kind of a thing. And it's not necessarily something where you are required to do everything, but you could commit and end at 10 kilometers, which is 6 miles, or 20 kilometers, which was very common for a lot of people to do. My wife and I went on probably, in the 4 years we were there, we probably went on 50 Volksmarches throughout central Germany. They have them here in our part of central West Washington. There's enough people that are associated with European thought that's involved with things like that, where there are several Volksmarching clubs here in this area. They are a fun thing, and you get the opportunity. We get the opportunity to experience nature in the rough, so to speak, nature in the hole, ourselves in the hole. There is no start time. Anytime between 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There's no finish time. Anytime, whenever you get there, they're going to close up the office at 6 o'clock in the evening. So there's the intent is to actually take that journey. And it was interesting to be. I was associated with a group from the United States that came. I was over there in Germany and helping a group from the United States military that were coming over to Norway to participate in an exercise. And one of the fellows, when he was involved with the introduction there, one of the comments by the Norwegian local folks, he said they're going to have a Volksmarch next weekend. And this one fellow was centered on the idea of winning. What time does it start? What do you get for the prize for being first place? That whole concept that's there. And you could not get him off of that. You could explain it to him 50 times, and he wanted to know what the prize was. That made a difference to him. If you'd have said it was a jelly donut, it would have answered his question. But that's not the real prize that's involved with something like this. And your comments very specifically bring these kinds of memories to me, and I'm sure to many of the other brothers that are here, where you actually saw something from a different perspective. And you saw it in not only yourself, but in someone else. Their perspective was dramatically different from the way you were brought up or the way you have learned to be today. And I find that your comments here about Masonry and about life in general are not just inspirational, but they're soothing. You don't have to win every day. It's not the big W win, underline, exclamation point, period, that whole idea. That's not the objective. The objective is for you to do the best you can and be comfortable with it and learn from it. And it's yes, I've got the name of your book written down, sir, and you will get a note from me, and I appreciate the thought. Thank you. Excellent evening. Thank you.
Thank you. That was actually that's a really good point about winning. For those who are interested, I actually I recently came across a movie that actually addresses that topic. It wasn't a huge blockbuster. It was kind of an independent film, but it's really good. It's called Peaceful Warrior.
Yeah.
It was actually filmed on the Berkeley campus. And it's about a true story. It was based on a true story of the gymnast by the name of Dan Millman. And he basically, without giving any spoilers away, essentially it was a story about how his chase for the Olympic gold was deterred by the fact that he got in a motorcycle accident. And so the entire movie is his personal struggle of wanting to win and wanting to be the best, and yet being forced by life circumstances to come to terms with the fact that there's a way to continue his passion even though he had a shattered leg. It was a very inspiring movie, and interestingly, not many people know about it, but it actually captures exactly what you're talking about there. The whole concept of the journey being more important than the destination being winning.
Winning, that definition all by itself is a big thing in Western, in American culture, at least a big thing. Yeah.
Anyone else have anything they want to, question, comment, that you want to share with Owen? This is weird. I'm used to our speakers, it being, 3 hours later versus 3 hours earlier. So this is kind of different. Rich Hallett, I see your hand go up.
Yeah. Hi, most worshipful sirs.
Getting promoted.
Really enjoyed the
talk. I did,
no,
not most, just just a past master.
I heard him call you most worshipful. Is it worshipful or?
Yeah, it's just worshipful.
Okay. I came in a little bit late, so I found it interesting you made a reference to a movie, because I'm always making references to movies to make a point. And you mentioned the Peaceful Warrior. That very much reminds me of the movie Running with Michael Douglas. Did you ever see that?
Yes,
No,
excellent movie.
Yeah,
I'll have to watch that.
it came out in the 70s, I think, and he had trained for the Olympics several times, and for one reason or another, he never made it. So he finally qualifies for the Olympics, and then he's in the lead in the Olympics, and he turns to look back, and he trips and falls, and he's, hurt really bad, and it takes him several hours to finish, and then he finally completes the race, in the dark hours of the night. Really a great movie.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look.
And that goes back to your concept of it, if it's the journey, not the destination. Owen, I do note that on your Facebook page, you seem to take every group of new soldiers and every new group of airmen that you get, you take them on a little hike before anything gets started. Beyond just getting them to see the beauty of Hawaii, I'm guessing there's a purpose behind that.
There is, yeah, and it's not necessarily everybody. It kind of depends on the person. So I do try to apply as much of these concepts as I can to just day-to-day work. And one story I can share is we had a very, very young sailor. He was 19 when he first showed up, and he checked in. He kind of struggled with the training program initially. Meteorology is a lot of it's very technical, and he definitely he struggled through high school, and I could tell. And he basically showed up struggling to even understand how to read a map legend. And after a while, it's typical of the Navy to immediately jump on a sailor who's struggling and assume that it might be some sort of disciplinary issue. Just study harder, just stay longer. And I vividly recall, this was a few years ago now, that this particular sailor, his demeanor was very sincere. You could tell he was very respectful. He was trying his hardest. He would, I caught him one day, he saw a gecko or something on the floor of our operations area, and he just went and found a cup and caught it and brought it outside. And it was just what he does on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis told me that he was just a sincere person. And that's when I realized, you know what? I don't think this is a disciplinary problem. That's when I decided I was going to talk to him personally. So I brought him into my office, and I pulled up a chair and I said, "Tell me your life story." Just whatever you're comfortable sharing, tell me. And he opened up. He actually said that as a child, he was bullied for many years. And then when elementary school moved on into middle school and high school, he realized that he learned a lot slower than most of his classmates. And as that learning continued, a lot of teachers kind of gave up on him. He would stay for hours after school trying to understand the material. And he had a lot of teachers basically say, oh, don't even bother coming anymore. You're just not going to get this, and just brush him off, to the point where he suffered depression in high school. He himself became a bully. And he was telling me this, acknowledging after the fact his transformation and his decline, essentially, until finally after high school, he decided, you know what, I'm just going to join the Navy and paint the underside of aircraft. That's all I know how to do. But his score on his tests were just high enough to be placed as an aerographer's mate. In other words, a meteorologist. And so he was in over his head. He just didn't know how to even wrap his head around some of our training material. But after telling me this entire story, I decided to call a meeting. And I basically realized that this was his journey, right? And he was trying his best. And this is his life story. And given that context, I called the department head meeting, and our commanding officer was in the room as well. And I basically said, there's more to the story. This is not a disciplinary problem. Just throwing punishment on him isn't going to do anything. And I basically said, give me an extra 2 months. We may need to be more creative with this training program, but he'll get it. And if we succeed, we'll be the first institution to not fail him. And I remember our commanding officer kind of just nodding and was like, all right, let's give this a shot. So all the lieutenants backed off, didn't like assign any sort of disciplinary action. And instead, I basically told him, I was still very strict. I said, you know what, you're struggling with studying. So here's how you study. Here's how you use flashcards. Here's how you start learning bits of information. You're not allowed to take an entire weekend off. You must come in on Saturdays, but you can have your Sunday off if you demonstrate that every Saturday you figured out another chunk of material, right? And so it was this compromise, and he was very, very willing to do it. He didn't see it as punishment. He saw it as we were trying to help him learn how to study. And so that ended up succeeding, and long story short, it took an extra few months, but he ended up not only mastering the material, he became one of our best sailors, and I saw him paying it forward. He ended up taking several other sailors under his wing and then actually mentoring them. And so it was really, really cool to see that personal transformation happen. And all we had to do was basically spend a little more effort in figuring out his life story and the journey that he was on.
It's a great story. Thanks for sharing it.
Yes, yes.
So again, everyone, the book is Journey on the website to get the book is journeyonthelevel.com. I hope you add it to your collection. It's in mine, obviously, and I like to revisit it. Now, in the very back, it's something that I haven't done because I'm big with a highlighter. But there's something in the very back of the book. Owen gives you a chance to write your own reflections down. So if you want to do that, fantastic. Me, I'm a highlighter, so I'm constantly highlighting things. And Owen, I may need to order another one for you because my highlighting started to bleed through the pages. But I do hope it's amazing what happens. I'm so glad that only you took the time to be with us this evening. I've been watching the faces on the screen. Yeah. You hit home with pretty much all of us. So thank you. And your fellow Cornell alum up here, he's
I already bought the book. I expect an inscription.
Thank you.
I gotta say it to you guys, go Big Red, right?
That's right.
By the way, just for fun,
much.
if you just for fun, because this is something that Owen doesn't tell anybody, I didn't find out about until after the Wards conference was over. He's a virtuoso pianist. If you go to YouTube, type in Owen Shieh, you are going to hear some incredible work. It's absolutely amazing. And how I didn't know that, and how I didn't get you to play something at the Wardens conference still bugs me.
Yeah, I don't advertise that, but yes, piano was actually my, I guess you could call my high school sport. So back then I actually would compete around my home state of Florida with piano. So that was fun.
But you were also in the Cornell band too, weren't you?
I played trumpet for the marching band. So
Ow.
that was my secondary instrument, but piano was my primary. And that's the one that I truly remember how to play.
Have you ever wrote any music on the piano?
A little bit, but honestly, composition has never really been my talent.
No.
Yeah, like improv and writing music, definitely not my cup of tea. I'm better at actually reading and interpreting music. So I'm better at like mastering a complex piece of work and then like presenting it a certain way. So more of like a concert style. Classical piano is what I'm more used to.
All right.
The improv or the music writing, that's something I've been wanting to get into. I just haven't had time to really study composition, but someday I will.
But his differential calculus skills are off the charts.
I know.
You've defined your thinking and your goals involved with thinking very well there. My brother was a musician as well. My younger brother played 5 different instruments, to include a Hammond organ with 3 manuals. He was very accomplished at this. Could not read music. Did write his own. Did play by ear. But he just, if you put a piece of sheet music in front of him, it was something you'd use to start a fire. That way it was constructive. He couldn't read it and didn't care to learn. But in the meantime, everybody has their position. And it's a question of knowing where you want to stand and why, and where you plan on, or what you plan on doing with that position. Yeah, it's interesting to find that you could read classical music and play that. My brother had no clue, and he played 5 different instruments. Yeah,
That's incredible.
Everybody's different. Yes.
Well, I do Mashaboop the Bams, and so I recorded something recently actually. And that's why I was wondering, if he was able to make music, because, composing and making your own music is pretty good.
Yeah.
I met a lady who actually made her own music on the piano as well, probably like a year or so ago. But she's from Singapore. But she came out to Los Angeles and was doing her thing, and she was all right. And so, as I do Mashaboop the Bams, recording and all that, poetry over instrumentals, it's always good to have someone that does pianos, because pianos kind of complement well. And so that's why I was saying, if you did, I would be more inclined to have you, come out, play the piano, record the piano, and then, fresh instrumental made from scratch type of thing, be a good thing.
Well, I'll take that as a personal project to try to get better at in the coming years.
Right on.
Thank you, though.
So, any event, I'm going to go ahead and say, and again, encourage everyone, get Owen's book. I want to thank everyone for space. This has been recorded, so I'll be sharing it. I'll be putting it out there. So everyone who missed this night, you can tell them, this is what you missed. And this is amazing. Yeah. And I will be putting on the Valley of Tacoma website, Facebook page. It looks like a piano concert of that Owen did at the University of Oklahoma in the spring of 2009. So I hope you all enjoy that when you see it. Again, Owen, my worship brother Owen, my friend, thank you again for sharing your thoughts with us. Like I said, you hit it out of the park with us all. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for sharing your material. It was well presented, and to get it from the source is a real treat. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Again, Most Worshipful Jim, thank you for having me. This was great.
Thanks, guys.
Before we end the meeting, did anybody hear about the Queen's husband who died?
Yes, we had.
Days ago.
We did.
Yeah. He was out of, the Royal Navy Lodge or something like that.
Yeah, the Navy Lodge 2612. There's a
Yeah.
BBC interview that I posted on the Grand Lodge Facebook page that talks about it.
I don't know. I got rid of Facebook, but
Brother,
7 years.
bye-bye now. We'll see y'all later.
well, the world
Thank
is
you very
yours.
much. Thank you, Owen. Thank you.
Oh.
Yep. Y'all have a nice night.
Yeah, good night.